Hello, everybody. I think everyone's kind of coming through from the wait room now. Just got a few more people to arrive. You'll be muted on arrival. If you can leave your microphones muted, that would be great. Okay, looks like everybody is in, so we'll make a start. Thank you everyone for being here. Appreciate you giving up your time to be with us today. My name's Lydia. My pronouns are she or they. I'm a white person with short brown curly hair, and today I'm wearing a kind of bright pink jumpsuit with buttons down the front and a navy polo neck, and I'm sat in front of several shelves with different books on. And before we get started, I'm just going to do a few bits of housekeeping. Just to remind you all, this event is being recorded, so if you don't want to be visible, just turn your cameras off. And yeah, as I said a second ago, your microphones will be muted. So if you could leave them muted, that would be great, because it just helps with background noise. If you have any technical issues, send me a message directly in the chat and I'll try and help you. Yeah, I work for ONCA, but I'm also taking part today as an artist. So I've kind of got two hats on, so hopefully I'll be able to do both roles. Yeah, so this event today is the last event to accompany MAGIFA, which is Hili's online exhibition that's available to view on the ONCA website until the 4th of April. It's been extended for a few weeks, so if you haven't seen it already, I'd definitely recommend checking it out. So Hili invited myself, Andrea and Sherelle to be part of this conversation today to share a little bit about our work and specific projects that we've sort of developed in the past year since the COVID outbreak. Hili's exhibition, MAGIFA, was a specific response to these limitations that COVID presents, because she was due to come over to Brighton to be ONCA's artist in residence last year and then subsequently exhibit with us, which hasn't been possible, so MAGIFA was made instead. So it felt really appropriate for Hili to invite other artists to kind of share what kind of work they've been making in the last year and how they've been adapting their practices, to have a kind of informal conversation about this and invite other people such as yourselves to come and be part of that. So each artist is going to talk for about 7 minutes, give or take, and then we'll have an informal conversation in response to some questions that we kind of put together in advance through a previous conversation, and then open that up to yourselves if people have kind of thoughts or comments or want to share anything of their experience. Be great to hear from you all. So Hili, you're up first. If you could let us know your preferred pronouns if you have them, and give us just a brief visual description of yourself before you start your presentation.
Okay, hi Lydia, I'm Hili. Thank you everyone for coming. My pronouns are she or they, and I'm wearing a black top with red flowers, chin length, hair chin length, and that's about it. Sitting in my home studio, and that's all. I'm really excited and happy for everyone who came. Also, thank you Lydia, Cheryl, and Andrea for participating. I was kind of wishing to have some kind of dialogue with other artists, which is the main thing that's missing, except of not exhibiting, but it's like the thing that's missing is the dialogue when you exhibit works and talk to other artists. So I'm gonna show very briefly I thought of showing my work from the point of view, one second, I didn't share my screen. Okay, 1 second. Please give me feedback if you don't see a presentation. 1 second. Okay, can you see Lydia, can you see a presentation?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, okay. 1 second. And does it move?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to speak about how I perceive space and how I react to the space where I exhibit, and then connect it to Magifa, which is a completely different thing than I usually do. And I thought this is probably the biggest shift I had, or my adaptation to this situation. So I'm just going to talk really quickly. I'm going to go through, I chose pictures of the space of the installation views and not necessarily of details, because this is a really important thing in my work, how I take the structure or the size of the place and play with the light, the proportions of showing my art. Usually I take objects and paintings and charge them with memory and history, and then react to the space they are exhibited in, even if it's paintings. So these are examples for many different kind of works I did. I am very influenced by museum displays and shrines, temples, all these kind of things, thinking about the color, and a lot of times the space itself and its history, like in my last exhibition in Amsterdam. So I'm just going kind of quick. This is the last exhibition that was in Amsterdam relating to the hospital. I built a shrine with hospital memories of people that visited. So I did go quickly, I apologize, but I wanted to concentrate more on Magifa and leave a lot of time for the other artists. So can you see now the exhibition page?
Yep, I can see that.
Okay. So what I was wanting to talk today was about the situation that happened to artists and to myself and to the whole world. And in the first lockdown, everything was canceled, everything was postponed. The first thing that were canceled, I think, were art things, because they are the least urgent, maybe. And during the lockdown, I found myself having an ongoing presence and every day with my son and family and inside the house, playing games, cooking, and doing the most basic things. And the only thing I kind of had in my art was thinking, imagining, and all the time drawing. I went back also in my art to the most basic things, and not like the installation you saw before, but going back to the most basic drawings, thinking about the games in landscapes that I imagined, or maybe it's the landscape of the everyday, I don't know, it's like, it was more kind of feelings. For example, this Bambi is after a small sculpture toy Aviv has, my son, and the thing is that I was just drawing. I didn't think it will become some kind of group of works. But the thing is that at some point I decided that I need an air and I need to create a space. Like in my installation, I was talking about the spaces, the light, maybe the pace a person can walk through. And the only way I thought of giving it this air or space or a place, creating it a place rather than a drawing, was to insert this kind of beats, to create these GIFs that are kind of, it makes them become alive and it, for me, became from a drawing to a space somewhere. And its existence, this space was the web, because GIFs work in the web, and it was thinking about the web as the space. So I kind of had this more maybe abstract in my mind thought of thinking of the web as the space, and like that relating to maybe other viewers or exhibiting the works, not in the normal format and physical format I was really used to and also love. So this was my kind of what happened, and that's why instead of doing an installation in ONCA that could not happen, I suggested to Lydia to do this, to give these drawings their space in the internet, the only communication or way we can consume art these days, almost only now things. So this is what I wanted to show, and I wanted to, of course, I actually in this talk, I wanted less to talk about my work, just to show the way I thought and why these gifts became to life, because the most, it's like creating this ongoing present through these gifts, and that was the feeling of the lockdowns, I think. So what I wanted is actually to invite other artists and hear how they shifted their work or their struggles and create some kind of dialogue. So also, I don't remember if Lydia said it in the beginning of the talk, I would really like if there are any other artists in the that joined us, I would really like and want to talk. I would really like to hear what do they do, how do they feel about it, and how their creation is working these days. I don't know, maybe. So I think that's it. I don't want to I have a lot of things to say, but I think it's like I did say what I was meaning to. So Lydia, are you there?
I am, yeah. Thank you so much, Hili. Do you want to stop sharing your screen?
Yes, I'm going to stop sharing. Did I make it in 7 minutes?
Yeah, I think you were under 7 minutes.
Really? Okay, so I was really quick. Sorry.
I know, that's fine. That's fine. I think it's just, yeah, it's setting the scene, and hopefully, as you said, like later on through conversation, some other things will come out from other people's responses. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So Sherelle, over to you.
Okay, thanks Lydia. Thanks Hili for having me here. And hi everyone. My pronouns are she and her. I'm wearing a striped dark blue shirt. My hair is up. I'm excited and half smiling, and I have a bookshelf behind me, and I'll just share the screen and jump right into things. Just let me know, Lydia, that you can see the presentation.
Yeah, I can see it. Do you want to just try flicking through? Yeah, that's working perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So I just chose to bring up first a couple of my projects pre-COVID, and I think it will also help understanding the shift. This is an installation view of an exhibition I had in the Bat Yam Museum of Art in 2019. Sculptural, quite large, dealing with space. The materials here, I mean, these ladders that are unclimbable are made of wood, and I opened the museum's windows here to let the light in. These structures, these architectural bird-like structures, are all made of white glue. In a technique I've been developing for quite a few years, taking white glue like the kindergarten glue, and through a lot of trial and error, finding a way to extract these architectural structures from them. And what you're seeing here on the ground, these islands are red velvet islands where people could also sit on them and experience the exhibition from the ground view. So a lot of what was moving me was the space was trying to take, I guess, my fascination with architecture and human choreography and the combination of them, and bring them into a space and create an opportunity for contemplation, playing a lot with the space of the exhibition itself. It's a very complicated museum to work in because it's completely round. So it was an interesting experience. A totally different work of mine that actually, it was in 2020, a moment before the world collapsed into itself. So I spent all of February in Durham, North Carolina, working on a community-based project in which I met over 100 people from the Jewish community there that through workshops with me marked their routes, their daily routes on the map. And through that and conversations, I was kind of learning mainly about the racial tensions in the city. And then all those maps stayed with me to create an exhibition that explores these relationships from postcards, which had on the one side of them, they had the map, and on the other side, they had what the people create their map legend, even with their age and how long they've been living in that in the city, extracting from part of the maps the areas where people aren't going and having it overlaying the map. So it kind of really showed that relationship, all the way to creating by extracting most of the maps, creating a kind of abstract collage of the people's experience of the city. So this north is up here, and my youngest participant was 9 years old. My oldest participant was actually 99 years old. So the collage follows the logic of the map. You can see here a couple of details from this collage. So these, and I mean, that was the last project I did in 2020 before landing back in Israel in March, straight into quarantine and then lockdown. And that kind of marks, I guess, two of my major practices, one that is very heavily studio-based and material-based, and the other that is very much going out. And then COVID happened. What we're seeing here is a residency I did in Israel in September in Arad Center of Contemporary Art in the desert. It was also the first time ever I did a residency in my own country, in Israel. So it was a very interesting experience. And what we're seeing in this installation, and I think Hili mentioned this idea of being all the time at home. Basically, this is the house where the artists get to live while they're in the residency. And I took out everything that was in the living room and kitchen of the house, and that became the material for this one night installation I created there. A lot of what I was doing was about looking for balance and unbalance. You can see this detail here. It's actually what you're seeing here. So a lot of details that and a play. And the interesting thing is no one saw this. This was an installation for me. Because no one could go anywhere. And I had the best of times. And it was really, for me, introducing the play back into my art practice, realizing I don't always need the viewers, that what I'm doing is so much for myself. And it created a shift in what I was feeling about all the cancellations that were going on. Another very large part of my life is meditation. Inquiry meditation, which I do with other people. And I started kind of looking at the people in front of me on the screen and taking screenshots when they agreed, and then drawing and starting to play with the idea of movement and the body and these parallel worlds I found myself living in. This is an etching. And then just starting walking around my neighborhood. So this is my hood. I live in southeast Tel Aviv, and I became really fascinated by these entrances and this entry point, or the difference between public space and private space, and how I'm different inside and outside. And then I actually started playing with this idea of these bodily movements, the bowing I do in meditation, the softness I have, and how it is or isn't translated into the world outside. And that's one of the things that's taking up a lot of my time. The other thing, I know this is Hebrew, no worries, I'll explain. The major thing I'm working on right now is the Israeli Art Hotline. Feeling during this time that so much pain has come up and so many frustrations, I opened a virtual hotline where people can call and just record their pains as artists. It's in Hebrew. And when someone calls, you hear kind of a voice message saying, you've reached the Israeli Art Hotline, press 1 to record your pain, or press 2 to hear a variety of optional pains. And then if you press 2, you hear from 3 to 8 for recording a pain regarding exhibition spaces and museums, press 3. For recording a pain regarding prizes and scholarships, press 4. For recording a pain regarding relationships between curators and artists, press 5, and so on. This is now, it's going to be open until the end of March, and I now have just over 50 messages by artists calling, and also curators calling and leaving their messages. And basically, all of this is going to be will turn into a sound installation that will be exhibited in June in the Ramat Gan Museum of Art. It's going to be anonymous, so I'm basically transcribing those messages and creating a kind of sound piece from them, because the anonymity is so important. Another thing that happened around that, these stickers that I showed you, was also a need to go outside of the virtual world, somewhere where things are happening. So I basically, one moment, I have some here, printed all these stickers, same as you'd have a crisis line or a hotline. And I went out and started sticking them around the city. This is in the area where we have a lot of the galleries. What you're seeing here on the right is, I was interviewed now for a conference about art during the time of crisis. I put this here because I find it really interesting, the gap between the interest in the concept of talking about the crisis and how comfortable or uncomfortable people are to actually call and leave a message. There's quite an interesting gap between the acceptance of this as an artwork and actually using it as a real life tool to record a message. And I'm finding that very interesting. So these are the two worlds I'm living in right now. One is kind of going back to etching and drawing in my fantasy world of body and movement and meditation. And the other is looking for a way out into the world and interact with what is now my art community here. Yeah, so thank you. Was that 7 minutes? I don't know.
I think it might have been a little bit over, but it doesn't matter. That was, yeah, really, really fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna share next. I'm just gonna get my things up. Sorry, bear with me 2 seconds. Okay, just before I start talking about my work, I just want to kind of give some content warnings. I am going to be making reference to mental health and mental distress, as well as racism and police brutality. So I'm going to be talking about a project that I did in the last year, specifically responding to COVID. But in order for that to kind of make sense, I need to talk about some of my quite old work. And I've made quite a lot of work in the past in public spaces, kind of doing performance or kind of creating interventions in public spaces to kind of question the politics of them and our relationship to them, kind of highlight sort of power structures, or, you know, how our behavior might change or be restricted in public spaces. And the image that you're seeing here is an image of me dressed up, trying to look like a kind of riot police officer. And this was in 2011, I made this work. And it was at the time when there were the London riots in response to Mark Duggan, a black man being killed by a police officer. And there were various riots and kind of protests that came out of that. And I have to kind of disclose that at the time, I wasn't looking at this from the perspective of a white person looking at kind of systemic racism and police brutality. Having learnt a little bit more about my privilege and that, you know, I look at that now and I realize that that is a part of this work and it's quite problematic. But at the time I was specifically thinking about kind of authority figures, and adopting kind of the guise of authority figures, and that allowing me to do things that I wouldn't do in my kind of non-artist form or non-kind of performance role with my body in a space. And I think also I was also thinking about kind of gender and the performance of that and the relationship that has to authority. Sorry, bear with me. And then this is an image from a performance that I did in 2012 in Singapore. This was part of a group residency, which is where I actually met Hili. And at the time, there were the London Olympics happening back in England. And this kind of phrase that's written on this placard, "Surveillance alone cannot stop determined individuals," was an extract from an article that I read that talked about the outsourcing of security for the Olympics and just the kind of militant language of it. I was trying to link the kind of the space where I was in Singapore back to what was happening in the place or the country that I lived in, and protest and kind of organized gatherings in Singapore at the time was illegal. I don't know if that's still the case now. And I guess kind of thinking about what can I get away with if I kind of frame something as a performance, and what permission does that give me to kind of break rules or transgress boundaries. And then, so as well as kind of putting my body into public spaces and kind of using that as an intervention, I would put kind of text or objects into a space. So this is St. Paul's Cathedral in London. There's a tiny little kind of plaque here, which is this. And this was after the Occupy camp that was there for several months. That was, kind of a social movement trying to overthrow capitalism, essentially, in no that was its kind of aim, and just kind of capitalism is crisis was a very kind of visual slogan that group were using when they were kind of organizing and collecting in a space that was kind of a public space, but maybe not really, to try and imagine alternatives to the kind of economic system that they were kind of in, or we are in. And this is a banner that I put in the town where I lived at the time. It was a site that used to be a petrol station. And I guess I was, kind of putting a question into a space to ask, what could this space be for? If it's not going to be used for kind of fossil fuels and consumption, what could it be? And it ended up becoming a Sainsbury's, I think, in the end, a year or two later. And then this, I can't remember exactly when this was. It was around the same kind of time, and I was collaborating with another artist, and kind of using props and materials to make performances in public spaces, again to kind of create physical barriers, to maybe draw attention to invisible barriers or kind of invisible restrictions or ways that we kind of limit ourselves in public spaces. But I feel, looking at this image now, it's almost, it could have been made this year or last year. There's a hole where somebody else could kind of be, and you'd safely be 2 meters apart, and you could maybe move through a space in a kind of COVID secure way. And this piece of work kind of inspired, when I was looking back at it, a workshop that I ran in August last year. And there's an organisation in London called LADA, which is an acronym for Live Art Development Agency. And every year they have this this program called DIY, and it's a kind of small pot of funding for artists to run professional development opportunities for other artists. And they kind of want them to be as kind of creative and off the wall as possible. And just kind of a way for artists to explore and take risks and kind of meet other artists and kind of spend time developing work in ways that most professional development opportunities maybe don't. So I ran this intensive weekend workshop with 22 other artists from several different countries. I think some of them are attending today, so hello if you're here from that. And the kind of invitation was for artists that make work in public space, make performance work in public space, to come together to think about ways that can still happen during COVID. And the sort of invitation was to see public space as a playground, because my experience of it since the COVID outbreak had been a site of real anxiety for me. Spaces that I used to find very permission giving and sort of transgressive in a generative way suddenly filled me with anxiety, and I wanted to kind of reclaim some of that playfulness in collaboration with other people, and kind of think about how the restrictions could be a framework for doing that. So we spent 2 days together online, responding to various kind of prompts and questions, and we'd kind of have time off screen where we would go into the public spaces that we had access to, and try out different things, and then come together and kind of talk about what worked, what didn't. And it was a really, really intensive way to start kind of thinking through some of the things that had felt, that I felt very stuck in. And it's kind of become its own thing that, you know, it doesn't kind of need my facilitation anymore. The meetings are kind of continuing every month with some of the artists, and they're still kind of meeting and making work and trying things out, which is great. Yeah, so I'm really happy that has been happening. I guess I kind of wanted to talk about, I guess you could see that as an example as something that kind of was a success, and a way in which, you know, I was able to do something in amongst the restrictions, or despite the restrictions. But my intention had been in July last year to take a year out of work, because I've been working full time for ONCA for over 4 years now, and I personally really struggle with maintaining a personal art practice whilst also having a full-time job, even though I'm incredibly fortunate to, you know, work with artists and work in the arts and work with really inspiring people. I don't know what it is. I can't compartmentalize, and it doesn't leave me any kind of energy or capacity to put to my own creative practice. So I had intended to have a year out, focus on my own work again, and kind of have that space in order to do that. And then COVID came, and ironically, I was furloughed for 4 months. I was very lucky to still kind of have my job, but I really, really struggled. I really struggled, even though I had the time that I had been craving for so long, and you know, I was reasonably financially secure because I had furlough because of the job that I had. My mental health took a real dive, and had several really, really difficult periods where I just struggled to function. The anxiety of not really knowing what was happening and what was going on, and compared to a lot of people, I was, you know, in a really privileged position. But yeah, I really struggled. And although I was able to get the funding to do this workshop, and the workshop was great, I just I think what I kind of realized is that I hadn't really been looking after my own kind of inner world as an artist, and it was kind of easier for me to step into that facilitation role with this workshop, because that's kind of what was familiar to me in my day job. But yeah, I kind of needed a lot of space and periods of self-reflection in order to be able to kind of reconnect with my artist self. And I wouldn't really say that I'm doing it that much now. I guess I've been working through is, in the last few years, I came out. I realised that I'm gay, and there's been a lot of kind of processing for me to do about that, and sort of connecting with that part of my identity, and sort of trying to figure out what part that plays in my kind of artistic work. So I've just been writing lots of terrible poetry on my phone about kind of being in the closet for decades, and what kind of effect that has had on me. So yeah, I guess I'm kind of interested in failure, as it might be deemed, and the importance of that, and you know, what this period can kind of offer in terms of personal reflection and personal growth, and how that might inform and kind of feed into my work in the future. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there, but I would love to, I don't know, maybe hear from other people about their experiences in the last year, and kind of what they're learning about themselves, in relation to that. So I will stop my screen share and hand over to you, Andrea.
Hello, everybody. Wow, thank you, Lydia, for sharing this talk. It was really actually moving. And thank you, ladies, Sherelle and Hili, for also sharing your work and inviting me to participate. I will now just check if my presentation is working. Right. Just let me know if it's visible. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So my name is Andrea and my pronoun is she, they. I am wearing glasses and a black shirt. I'm white and I'm a human being. So yeah, I'm gonna stop with that. I'm gonna focus actually today a bit on my practice, but also like, of course, the Corona situation, pandemics. And I would like to start by saying that I'm a visual conceptual artist, but I'm also a researcher. So it's kind of a interesting combination because like we all research in our practice, but at the same time, I use research as a form of artistic practice. And I also employ various academic methods and process-based methodologies to kind of enhance my practice. It's kind of like, you know, cross-breeding academic research with material practice. So artistic research as a discipline is very young and new, and I won't venture into that now and trying to legitimize why it's working or not, but I would like to talk a bit more about my practice and how I do things. And usually what I do is like one of, let's say, one of the questions that I usually use in my practice is what, how, and for whom, which actually gives me a skeleton to locate my topics and my subjects of research. And often I employ kind of speculative narratives and speculative fiction to actually investigate whichever, you know, concepts I'm interested in. And now I would just like to introduce you something that, well, the last project that I did, which was in 2019, because this was the last exhibition and research that I was able to do in the field. And that is a project that kind of encompasses 3 different smaller researches, yeah. And the project is called Dialectics of Value, which was actually based on 3 different types of research. One was actually about notion of shame and different types of representation of shame within the material forms, but also linguistic settings. So what I did is I actually asked, it started in Israel at my residency at Digital Arts Center in Holon. And I actually asked people to donate objects of shame and sounds that associate them to shame. And I started kind of preserving them into these like medical jars in a similar format like organs are preserved. Like I didn't use formaldehyde, some similar techniques, but I started preserving them. And I was curious to see actually how people associate their personal experiences of shame and things related to that notion through materials. Because I was curious actually how for me the most important kind of like question was like how actually these things navigate our culture, the way we communicate with each other, and also the way we later on create and structure our society. So I decided to make this really weird archive of shame objects and sounds. And people started at the end donating from like all over the world. I have over 80 objects now that were exhibited in different venues later on, with also accompanying sounds and stories for each object. And I don't know, like I got from like antidepressants to passports to like voting slips to bodily fluids and skin, condoms, sex toys, all sorts of things. But what was interesting about this was actually like, it gave me a certain kind of like insight into a landscape and how we actually culturally and linguistically perceive shame. Because like, you notice that there are certain patterns that reoccur, and then also patterns are a form of language, and they also create a certain kind of like, you know, well, behavioral patterns that we all identify with. So for me, that was a very interesting way to approach this project. And then I also started digging also a little bit about, I started digging into legislative protocols and shame, and how actually shame is used through a law to serve as an incarceration tool, like, and a communal alarm. So that was quite interesting. And a lot of people also ask me kind of like, okay, Andrea, so what is like the difference between shame and guilt? And I would say that like shame is, well, it works with identification. So it doesn't work so much with action and performance as guilt, which means that guilt is equal to I did something bad, whereas shame is I am bad. So it kind of works in a different way. But this was one of the, for example, recent projects that I worked in. And I thought like it was interesting to also just explore how archiving can, you know, be used to reappropriate certain meaning to a certain construct like shame. And following that, I did this work that was more relating to kind of like rites of passage as a method of play. So I used the chess template to build a game that works with identity rights and identity transgressions. So instead of like a checkered field, I had different fields that represented emotions and identity growth. And figurines and pawns, such as like king, queen, rook, or knight, were, let's say, king was the ego. I think queen was selfhood, knight was values, and the pawns were choices. So each time the players would move the figurines, they would have kind of like this kind of meditative tactics of self-negotiation, and they would write, for example, also their opinion, what happens to, let's say, selfhood when it goes from ambition to compromise. And I would collect these little post-its while these players were playing, and then examine them as some kind of like, of course, also, you know, anthropological data. So for me, like this game was more like, you know, exploring internal identity, you know, changes and transgressions. And the point of the game wasn't really to finish it. You can't really finish it because after the 5th or 6th move, you get lost. So it's more about kind of meditative contemplations on identity rights. So here I was also parallelly examining like politics of self-care and how actually this works, you know, within, of course, neoliberal paradigm that we're working in and living in. So this work actually kind of was created also in a reflection to mental health, you know, situation of my own, and also how I can kind of like through some kind of analytical methodologies find maybe a better way to self-negotiate. So yeah. And following work, the last one that was within this dialectics of value exhibition was actually concerning relationship between temporality, measurement protocols, and identification, and also system structures. I was curious kind of like how to examine how time impacts, for example, measurement. And I built this like life-size kind of like scaling system, which is a completely kinetic structure without any screws and anything. And it's balanced, as you can see on the image here, with the plumb bob. It's kind of like a hanging bronze plumb bob. And on one side, there is a candle here. And on the other side, there's like 5 plates that have a different kind of like representation of value. And the whole structure kind of symbolizes the system, not any specific system, but just a system or structure or some kind of vertical hierarchy. And basically, when the candle is lit, the time is passing, and as time is passing, also the balance needs to be constantly recalibrated by the structure, otherwise it will collapse, which it does after the candle burns out. And then this was set in Amsterdam in a gallery, and then each time the candle burned out, the structure collapsed, and the invigilators would put the structure back together, and then the process would start again. So for me, it was interesting just to see how we kind of examine measurement and structure and also temporality within certain systems. I do need to say that like most of these works actually are accompanied by partial academic research. So besides just me playing with materials, I do an academic research on it. So like there's also like, for example, I was really curious like examining Jonathan Crary's work, which he's an art historian and, well, also many other things, philosopher, but he had this work called 24/7 Paradigm and the End of Sleep, which talks about neoliberalization of sleep and co-option of intimacy. So now basically neoliberalization of intimacy, for the sake of value production. So I was a lot researching on that, and this is also how this work came into being. And today, today I'm trying to negotiate my art practice within COVID, which is ridiculous, if I may say, because like I'm most of the time I'm also trying to deal with failures, as Lydia mentioned. So what I did like last year I completely collapsed with my art practice. All of my shows got canceled, and I focused on writing, because I needed some kind of output of my creative energy, and I managed to give quite a few talks and publish quite a few like essays and some more discursive, some more artistic. One of the there are two journals that I kind of like enjoyed working with was like Lish Journal, which is actually a London-based journal. That focuses on foreigners' English, and the Simulacrum Journal, which is part of the University of Amsterdam Arts and Culture Department. So I will definitely now afterwards give you the links so you can download and check it out if you're interested. And what I'm doing now, well, as you can see, like from what I already like kind of gave as an example, I actually build concepts first and then like use Medium almost as a tool to kind of like transfer those ideas. So for me, Medium is not so, well, it's not central as much as the concept is in research. So I'm right now, my new project is called The Existential Crisis of Imaginary Characters, which focuses on speculative fiction as a forensic method. And speculative fiction is a literary form that through kind of like scientific and academic inquiry explores, and fiction explores like potentialities, you know, and I'm trying to kind of like through speculative fiction explore future mythologies of art institutions, which means I'm curious how art heritage, art production, and ecosystem of public imagination will be like few hundred years from now. So like how are we going to preserve cultural heritage? How are we going to use art? Will art become immaterial? How are we going to archive it? And also what art will mean per se. So this is my new project that I'm working on. It's still in an early phase, so I really don't have any visual material to present, but also talking about future and sustainability and other things. I think like, as Lydia mentioned, I think for me it was very moving that she mentioned this issue with mental health, because I also struggled as an artist and also just as an individual in this last year with my demons and creativity, and also, you know, there's this element of trying to chase, you know, your ambitions, but at the same time, like we're all really confronted with our own condition and circumstances. And for me, like one of the things that was really important to start asking is like, how can I reflect better on my art practice? And also like, is what I'm now doing at all sustainable? So I would like to just conclude with a question that maybe can open a dialogue for all of us now. And that question will be this. So how can we use pandemics to actually reimagine more sustainable ways of artistic practice and, of course, institutional performance? Because I think this question is something that we're all now faced in the cultural sector. And I would also like to start maybe potentially a debate on this topic. Thank you very much. That was all from me, and please enjoy.
Thank you, Andrea, and Shirel, and Lydia, for all your great presentations. It was super interesting for me to hear your experiences. Does anyone else want to share maybe something, or maybe we can answer or think about what Andrea, I think you can unmute yourself now.
Yeah, everyone should be able to unmute themselves if they want to say something.
Maybe I want to address this idea of failure, which I think for me, actually this year somewhat released me from this, because the race to the next achievement and exhibition was stopped and cut. And what sustained me was a small business that was taking up also a lot of my time, and that just evaporated because I worked with tourists, which aren't part of reality right now. So I lost my business, and for the first time in my life, I could just do art, but also there was no viewing of the art. So it was just me being creative. And it kind of moved aside the questions of how are things received, that I felt very often were looming over me in my studio. And it opened time to go back to what it is for me to be creative and to play and to do. So with this, I feel like I was forced to stop and stay in one place and look at my things with my own eyes. And I think these concepts of failure and success were chasing after me for many years. And I was constantly battling with them. And this year, they kind of actually took some kind of a little bit of a rest. So I feel very grateful for that. And slightly worried of having to very soon rush back into the race and figure out how to make money. But for now, I feel I received a little bubble of grace.
Shirel, I really liked your installation during your residency that you just did for yourself. Yeah, and also just working with what you had around you at the time and kind of using that as your material. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I was just thinking, Andrea, about the kind of question that you posed about this idea of, I can't remember exactly how it's phrased, but sustainable practices. And I think it's interesting for me because I work within an arts institution, albeit very small, and I'm very aware of the kind of conversations that have been going on about the kind of duty of care of institutions towards individual artists. And I can only speak on my experience being based in England, but in terms of the kind of financial support and kind of provision for individual artists in England has, a lot of people have been falling through the gaps, whereas there's been not for every institution, but comparatively a lot of like funding and support for institutions. And I guess I kind of have these two kind of questions in parallel of like, how do institutions like better care for artists and kind of advocate for them rather than the other way round, and you know, kind of counter this devaluing of artists as individuals and the kind of investment in them, but then also as an individual person and, you know, an artist myself, like how do you kind of tend to your and care for your inner world when, yeah, you kind of could see this last year as an opportunity to take a step back, and the kind of pace and the pressure of projects and exhibitions and delivery and whatever kind of being removed, but also acknowledging that there's a huge amount of anxiety that surrounds that because of the kind of larger political, social situation that's happening. So how, I guess I'm kind of answering your question with a question like, how do we care for each other better, you know, individually on a personal level, but then also in a kind of systemic level as well. Yeah, I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Well, for me, like I mean, like I'm originally Croatian, but I live in Netherlands for a while now, and like looking at this system, how it's kind of well, how it works and how it takes care of artists, like it's very, very, you know, much focused on economy and how to maintain that aspect. And I believe, like, you know, like trying to humanize the system would be how actually we should, you know, care better. But also, like, you know, I think talking about cultural politics is very important from also point of view of an artist, you know, because I think like artists are often like showcasing just their work, you know, like and trying to make it within the system and market. And often, you know, actually their voices are not really heard when it comes to policy making and when it comes to like adjusting, you know, their experience into more legislative forms, you know. And I think, like, for example, like I really like Cheryl, I think this project with Hotline, I really like, you know, it's warmed my heart. I really loved it. I think it's so, you know, simple and so at the same time like sophisticated in terms of addressing the problem, you know, because like as we talked about, mental health issues are maybe one of the biggest issue right now, besides just like the virus that is happening in the world. Like I think economic crisis is on a secondary place, you know, comparing to what we are experiencing all as individuals, you know. And I think art should really, that's why I said maybe we should rethink how we consume practice and also work with art, because, you know, this kind of ambitious chasing, you know, way of working is not sustainable. I had a burnout personally last year, and I also took a, you know, year off in terms of, well, in terms of everything. But yeah, I think, you know, I think we kind of touched upon the topic because sustainability, also like in terms of production, like material production, especially visual arts. I'm a bit worried how much we are producing and not really thinking about like ecological impact. Like art is a huge polluter also, you know, like we're not really like thinking about that element at all. We're just like, you know, trying to get that show at the museum, you know, and that's all that we're, you know, fixated on. And I think these questions, I mean, again, I have no solution, but I think they're really important to ask. And I would love to hear what our audience has to say and their point of view. So, yeah.
Can I say something about education, Lydia? Is that all right?
No, of course you can't. Not me.
No, you're not allowed. I was just thinking about when people were talking about kind of institutions, well, institutions like being supported, but also like supporting artists. And then, yeah, I was just thinking about like education institutions and what's going to happen with like art schools and universities and stuff. Because I was like in the middle of doing a master's when COVID happened, and then the uni that I was at just kind of didn't communicate with any of their students for like 3 months at all. So it's, yeah, so I kind of like ended up leaving the course because it was just like non-existent anyway. but there's all sorts of kind of tension between like students then feeling like that, like kind of guilty for their institution, because they're like, we're all now very aware of like the pressure that institutions are under, like the financial pressure, but also like we need to be able to think about like ourselves as well and like what we need from that situation. So yeah, I don't know what my point was, but I was just like, yeah, thinking about education and like art schools and how, I don't know, I just, yeah, how they're going to come out of the situation, because I think something's going to have to, if like fees are kind of overruling students like welfare and actually like partaking in things, then it seems a bit wrong, obviously. But yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Do you kind of, having gone through that experience, do you, like when you look back on it, do you have like ideas or thoughts about, I don't know, like what a future like art school could look like that would, I don't know, I don't want to use the word like the phrase pandemic proof, but could adapt in some way that it could cope with those kind of, I don't know, like have you thought about what that might look like, if that makes sense as a question?
Yeah, I don't know, like I think it's tricky because like there's so much reliance on like resources. So obviously if you're an art student and the art school's closed, then you don't have a studio, and then like, so the kind of resources question comes into it, and then like, should you have to pay the same amount for sitting in your room and like feeling a bit maybe twiddling your thumbs, trying to do work, but like and not having like all the resources. So yeah, I don't know, like it's difficult because it depends what your practice is as well, because I didn't, like I was on an art writing course, so I didn't necessarily need the studio space as much as some other people. But I don't know, I think there's something about like mutual, like maybe less, there's definitely a feeling of like mutual responsibility between students and teachers, and I think maybe something about that should change, or like there should just be more support from the government. And also, I don't know, obviously art schools shouldn't be kind of like not valued anyway as like places of new ideas. I don't know, that was just like a garble, but yeah, something where there's less like pressure on everyone involved, and pressure for like actual like materials and space, and or it should, yeah, I don't know, it's hard.
Can I say at this point, Lydia? Hi Lydia, it's Peter. Can I say something?
Of course, hi.
I was really touched by what Lorna was just saying. I'm a teacher at art school. Am I able to share my screen? I'd just like to show you a print.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Is that visible?
Yeah.
This little woodcut print that I made for my students just under lockdown, because obviously it was just an awful situation to be taken out of studios and away from resources. So I made this and just sent a print to everybody. And I sent it to lots of people actually, but it was primarily for my students. So I'll.
What kind of?
What stage did you send it to them? The beginning?
Yeah, at the beginning of the first lockdown. So when they were first realizing that they weren't going to get a degree show and everything was going to be done online and it would be a digital submission. And for some people, they adapted to that like ducks to water, and for others, it was just completely devastating because of the materiality of their practice. So it was a really very difficult time for a lot of my students. And for me too, as an artist, I found I used the time more for developing networks, partnerships, building relationships with other organisations in my town. I live in Reading, and we've just started to put together partnerships to make new opportunities for emerging artists when they're coming out of art school, which is what we're working on at the moment for students coming out of Reading University and Winchester School of Art. So I've kind of used the time really to as a planner and facilitator to start making plans for when it's possible to put on shows again, to give a platform to those students who've so far been denied the chance to show their work to anybody. So that's what I've been up to.
It's really amazing you did that. It's really...
Thank you.
For the students, yeah. No one cares.
I wanted to ask maybe Andrea, because you used the word imagine. And I find that this whole situation, I mean, and as Lorna and Peter just also mentioned, kind of through the whole, this art making, economy, societal responsibility, just it's all up in the air and we realize it's not sustainable. But I, for instance, have a really hard time trying to imagine how else it might be. And I can see how as things are opening, they're kind of falling very easily back into the old patterns. And I'm wondering if you, Andrea, or maybe also other people do have like some kind of imaginary different scenario, because I think that's crucial to start maybe shifting the patterns we already know.
Right, thank you for the question. Well, I personally, my part of imagining is very practical, actually. I am, I don't know, like I personally got busy with trying to build educational strategies. I occasionally give lectures and then I'm trying to, you know, create like with people that I'm working with in workshops and students is I'm trying to build like think tanks where we all collectively contribute with our ideas, you know, of what, let's say, the cultural system should look like. You know, not, I mean, like it's entertaining the utopian idea, but at the same time, like exercising potentialities, you know, like with possibilities of examples that we have. I also like personally now I'm working in, this is like an Amsterdam-based platform for it's called Beka platform, which works with kind of, it's an independent NGO that works with examining cultural politics and also giving, you know, like local cultural politics and giving maybe suggestions to ministries and also like larger like institutional entities, you know, how they should readjust, restructure. For example, one of the topics which is I wanted to actually address to Hili is like, you know, parenting and culture and art practice and cultural workers. How do they deal with like, you know, I mean, like in Netherlands, art is very, well, how would I say it? It's very entrepreneurial. Like they require from you to like establish it as a business, you know, like everybody has a studio, everybody, but not on a level of artistic studio, but on a level of firm, you know, that functions in a very, very business-like level. So artists don't really talk about their practice here. They're like, shit, you know, like my income revenue is lower, you know, like than last year. So like the topics are, I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course. I'm not saying that this is the pure reality, but like people are very much concerned with their income, much less than how they're going to showcase their work, at least in my circles. And they're also concerned with problems of, well, laws, like how to adjust. Like, for example, like I have a lot of friends that are parents, and they're artists, and Corona really didn't help because they cannot put kids in school, you know, like, and their art practice also suffer from that a lot, which means their also income suffered. And I actually wanted to pose a question to Hili, how are you dealing with that? But in terms of imagining, I'm personally not trying to reinvent, you know, anything new, but I'm asking around people and trying to bring collective, you know, ideas, and then make a compilation, a little anthology of our, you know, potential future. Yeah.
So Andrea, that's right. I didn't have any time to go to the studio because I was with Aviv all day, and actually Magifa was kind of what happened. It's like creation had to find a way, and it was through the games with Aviv and his toys and drawing, because this is what I can do at home. But there is beginning to be this residencies and places that support artists with kids, but it's not something that's in the system. And yeah, and as an artist in Israel, I don't know if income, I mean, I don't know, I guess in Amsterdam, maybe an artist can check the income of being an artist, but here you have artists, and even if you're successful as an artist, you have to have another job or 2 or 3. So it's like the most non-economical thing to do. I'm guessing that it's like that everywhere. It's just here also there's really little crumbs of cake for the artist, and they like not much. And the COVID took also this. So so yeah. So in that sense, I don't know. Maybe it makes, when you're not thinking economically, like thinking, like you said, that it's like, how did you call it? Like an interpreter. How did you call the artists that they are having a company?
Entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
we call them here entrepreneurs, you know.
So maybe
completely neoliberalized to the bone, you know.
But you know, maybe the art is more free.
Sorry?
Because maybe the art itself that is created has more freedom when it's not like under this. I mean, I don't know. It's like when you don't think about.
You know, like that's a long debate. You know, like I wouldn't necessarily assume that it's free, just because like there is a capital behind it. I think it's even more kind of like it. I believe that art is more kind of a captive within also the market. You know.
That's what I'm saying.
So
that's
but
what
yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are general things that also were before. Maybe I don't know, but about sustainability and what you said, I'm not sure. I mean, it might be true, but I'm not sure that the art world is the most pollution, like that polluting. I don't know, but maybe the shops, the merchandise, and the plastic that sells after.
I didn't mean necessarily polluting just with material, you know, like I think like how education is disseminated is a way also of pollution, you know, like not just, you know, how we structure certain funding systems can be also, or how we press artists to like compete in the market that is, you know, not framed properly. That can also be a form of pollution, like systematic pollution. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else want to share maybe experiences or?
I think the idea of creating a healthy or sustainable art practice, I think links to what we define as art practice. Like Andrea was saying, like if you're working as an artist, as an entrepreneur, making money off of it, there's, you know, you often have to think about who's your audience, what do they want, and it limits your playfulness that you were showing, Sherelle, earlier. And so I think it links to like capitalism, and unfortunately, someone's got to bring it up. And the fact that we all need money to survive. And so how to what extent can you be playful? If you still need someone to say, that's a cool project, I'll give you funding, or I'll buy whatever, or like, like if someone else doesn't think it's cool and wants to give you money for it, then it doesn't really allow you to continue to work on that work as an artist. So it's tricky. I'm in school too right now, relating back to Lorna was saying earlier, school, and I've been lucky to have school that actually has been pretty supportive. All of our spaces have been closed, so there's been tension of like paying for services that we're not using, but just the idea of people saying, how are you? Like, not how are you? So I'm also in Canada, so we say, how are you? Not you all right. So, yeah, so someone saying, how are you? And not to respond, oh, I'm fine. Like, you actually want to really know, how are you? And I think COVID has, although we've all fallen into, or many of us have fallen into struggling with mental health and other things, myself included, I think it's allowed us to also be aware of that. And we're talking about it right now, right? And so through this, maybe that's going to allow us to then see that the system is not created to support us. It's created to produce. It's created to produce stuff that often ends up in landfills. And it's created for an outcome, not necessarily for the people involved in the system. So then how do we shift it? I'm blabbing, but and so yeah, maybe we need to think. It's a hard question because it's not one solution, right? There's many spots of coming at it. And I think this idea of materials, like my work relates a lot to like embodied practice and materiality and research creation as well, similar to what Andrea was talking about earlier. And thinking more about the full cycle, the future, what do we want to build? I just verbal diarrheaed on you all, but I don't know where that was going, but it's morning here, so yeah.
No, it's great. It's great. It's really good to also hear feedback from people that connected, because even if it's just your feelings about things. But yeah, good morning.
But I also think like I really wanted to thank you, Hili, for also like making this happen in you, Lydia, as well, because I think it's really important to actually get us all together, like this, and have these kind of like little discussions about what's going on, because I realized like I got bored of presenting my own work after a while, honestly, like just like making presentations and showing my images of like my work. I'm for me now this is more interesting part, like actually of creation, trying to like see what we all experienced and how can we employ this in any way for the future. I think it's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us as well.
We've got like 5 or so minutes left. I just wondered if how people would feel, like anyone, putting this out to anyone, if there's anything that hasn't come up, like, I don't know, are there kind of projects or artists or initiatives, like, for example, Peter's lovely like woodcuts for his students, like things that have been really inspiring that maybe people might want to share, just as like a nice kind of positive end before we close the event? Silence.
There are no positives.
Well, then I'll share positives. Hello, everyone. My name's Jenny. Yeah, two things for me, really. Firstly, I was on Lydia's weekend, which was amazing and great. And yeah, from that, we continuing to meet on quite a semi-regular sort of basis and continue various dialogues of all sorts of artistic stuff and just ranting about the world and things. But it's really nice. It's really nice to keep engaged with those people and have artistic discussions and talks and debates, and yeah, and we set each other like tasks and things, so it's nice to have that as an ongoing prompt. You know, we're doing things and going out in the world, and even if they're only little tiny things, it's something that I find really positive to do. Yeah, so that to me has been really positive. And I think that although it has been isolating for well, yeah, for everyone really, having so many things moved online is actually really accessible as well. So like in that weekend, there were people we had people from Canada and Israel and the UK and all sorts of places, and you know, talking together, and we'd have never been able to do that if it had been a weekend in, you know, in London or something. But I don't know, maybe they'd have flown in from Canada, I don't know. So I find that there are good things. This accessibility and this ability to reach other people and engage is, yeah, I think there are good things to come from it. And someone was saying earlier about things just going back to the way they were. I think there's a kind of, humans are quite naturally, you just want things to go back to a certain way that they're safe and comfortable with. But I think it would be really good if we can, you know, keep things more accessible for more people. Don't know whether that happens or not. We'll have to see. Sorry, I'm waffling now, so I'll just shut up.
Thank you for the waffle. It's great. A few things have been shared in the chat. Yeah, so definitely check that out. There's some interesting things in there.
I do just want to mention, Lorna wrote in the chat something, I'll just quote, having to come to terms with what we ourselves like in terms of our own work. And to me, that's a very powerful, clear, important question to ask, especially, I mean, I think it took me a decade to let go of my art student years and what everyone else thought is good or I should do. And it's such a process to see with our own eyes and hearts and minds what we do, and to have that be the central prism. And I think this time now can be a push and an engine towards that, because there's so much empty space, we have to listen to ourselves. So I think, Lorna, you put it in a very like clear, simple, concise way, and to me that's very optimistic. Like that's just a very powerful, simple way to look at what we do. So thanks.
Thanks, Sherelle. Yeah, I think it's like it's been like interesting to kind of, because it's definitely like a chewy process in a way, because you have to just kind of do what you do, and then like not, because I just like have only just like after a year been kind of reaching out to like friends and stuff and be like, oh, do you think this piece of writing has anything to do with anything? But it means that for a year, like I've kind of, yeah, had to like just sit with what I do, and like if I can stand it, then that is actually quite important, even though like we're taught to be so kind of, yeah, like self-conscious, like I said in the message, but kind of forward facing and like public facing. But actually if you like actually like your own work, then that's quite a big deal, because everyone's always so self-deprecating about their own work, and it's kind of expected almost to be like that, like, oh, I hate this, but I'm putting it in a gallery. So it's kind of like a weird reverse of that or something, I don't know.
I just want to say that there was also someone writing in the chat and sharing links of something interesting. So read, I don't know, is it gonna be erased when Lydia, when it's...
I'll save it. And yeah, when we share the recording online, I'll make sure that the chat is shared as well, so we don't lose it.
I just wanted to ask also, like, because I'm probably all of us are coming from different environments and different countries also. So I'm just curious if you're willing to share just like what kind of systems in place you have for artist support now, like also funding systems in your country. Like here we had emergency funds, for example, that were more related to like owning a private company, but also like there are some funds that helped artists kind of go through this crisis. And I was curious to just hear also how is in UK or Israel or I don't know, somewhere else. I don't know, if you're willing, of course.
I can speak if no one else is gonna. Just quickly, thanks everyone. It's been amazing. I feel like we could talk about this for way longer. Thanks so much for sharing. I'm in Berlin at the moment, but I was previously in Manchester. And just one thing I'd like to mention related to that was how all this uncertainty and everything has made people question everything, and there's been a lot more mutual aid. And there was something in Manchester called the Greater Manchester Artist Hub, which was a collection of organisations and charities around Manchester, Greater Manchester, and they came together to support people and offer advisory sessions and opportunities. So yeah, I just think it's really interesting when we bring up things around accessibility. There's just loads of stuff that could come off the accessibility as well in terms of questioning gallery access. Like some of the projects I'm doing, some of them work in the galleries, but they're doing projects and people wouldn't necessarily go to galleries. So it's like addressing that question of accessibility into gallery spaces as well. All these other questions that are coming up, like politically and stuff. I could go on forever, but I'm not going to because you had a question. Sorry, that's my answer.
Okay, well, we are pretty much at time, so unless there are any really, really burning last comments, I think we'll end there. Yeah, I just want to thank all of the speakers. Thank you, Hili. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Sherelle. And thank you all for being here with us and kind of your input into the conversation. It really is, yeah, so nice to kind of hear your...
Thank you for taking the time and connecting and hearing us. And
yeah, thank you very much.
Lydia also, and ONCA. It's also my...
Thank you all for joining, of course, and taking time for us.
And if you haven't looked at Hili's exhibition yet, definitely check it out. It's on the ONCA website. And yeah, like I said, I will save the chat and the recording from this event will be online in the next week or so. So if you want to rewatch it or if you want to share it, please do. And yeah, just thank you all again for being here and hope you have a good rest of your day, whatever point in the day it is, wherever you are. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lydia.
Hi.
Hi. I'm trying to understand if there's a way we can share the chat with the participants, because I think Sam said that they would love to access the chat, because there was someone that was posting also links, and I don't know, I didn't read it because I was in the...
Yeah, they should have been able, all of the participants should have been able to save it. I have saved it, so I can post it online, like all of the links and stuff. Yeah, if anyone contacts you and they need something specific, let me know and I can share it with them.
Yeah, I also saved it, but I don't know where it saves it to. And I'll have a look
somewhere. Yeah, let me look.
Yeah, but it was really interesting. Thank you also for sharing so personally.
Oh yeah, thank you. I just felt like it was, it's just me being honest about how the year has been. So yeah, I felt like it was important to do. But yeah, thanks for suggesting this and kind of putting it together. It's been really good.
Yeah, it was super interesting for me.
Yeah, great.
Right. Okay, so we'll be in touch. I'll miss having all these Zoom talks with you.
Well, we just have to keep in touch and have more.
Yeah, we just need to have more. That's the thing. Okay, maybe we will have a different excuse. Okay, so you're still recording. This is not for the record.
Oh yeah, sorry. Hang on. How do I?